Hello, my name's Paul and welcome back to another one of my Asana training videos. In this video, I'm going to be walking through step by step how to create a new project in Asana. I'm going to show you how to use things like the timeline, discuss whether you should use boards, there's the filters, posting status updates. I'm really going to cover everything there is to know about setting up a new project. Now, this video, what you're actually going to see is actually a lesson, a sample lesson from my Master Asana training program. If you do want to learn more about this program, there's a link in the description below this video. And when you sign up, not only do you get access to my online course, which teaches you all about how to master Asana, train your team, and communicate best practices, but you also get access to project templates, Zapier workflows, and you get access to me through weekly group coaching that I run twice a week as well. So check out the link in the description to learn more about that coaching program. And without further ado, let's get into this lesson all about setting up projects in Asana. Welcome to the first lesson of Module 2. In this lesson, we're actually going to dive in now and we're going to set up a project in Asana. I'm just going to set up an example project and I'm just going to talk through my thought process and explain why I'm doing things in certain ways, and I will just draw your attention to different features and explain how you might use them within different projects. So the first thing you'll want to do, if you haven't already, is perhaps create a new team. So to do that, I'm just going to go over to my personal account, and down here, if you do have an organization, you will have an add team option. So as we discussed in the previous planning lessons, I did talk about why you might want to use different teams. So if you are creating a new team for your first project, this is where you would do it. So I'll just give it a name like marketing. I can write a description in here which might be useful to explain the purpose of that team, and you can add members as well. Now I would say you don't necessarily have to add members right now. It may be worth putting off adding members until you do your rollout later, assuming you're brand new to Asana, of course. Some people I've worked with will set up the account first, sort of get some of the projects and things going, understand it themselves first before onboarding their team. Obviously, it's completely up to you, but if you are brand new to Asana, I would consider postponing adding new members for now. You then have some privacy options, so you can set a team to be what's called membership by request. What this means is people in your organization will be able to see the team on the sidebar on the left, but they won't be able to join it. They can request access to the project, to the team, and then somebody will have to approve that request. The other options, they're grayed out here, but because I'm not on premium, but you can create a team that is hidden. This basically means nobody will ever see it on the sidebar. It's as if the team doesn't exist. So you would use this for maybe like if you have an executive team that's really private for executive members, you may make that hidden. And you could have a team that is what's called public to organization. That would be a team that anyone can voluntarily join. So it could be good for just general company projects or social club or something like that. So that's where you'll create your team. And then on the sidebar, by clicking plus here, you can then set up a project. You can also click up here to start a project as well. As you can see, there are a few options. We can create a project from a template, from a spreadsheet, or we can start a blank project. In the templates, there are some pre-built Asana templates that can be quite useful. I would say they're not very good at telling you how to do certain projects, but they are more there to give you some ideas on different ways you can use Asana. In a future lesson, I will show you how to create your own templates and save them in here as well. But for now, I'm going to start a blank project. So I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to do, let's say this is a client project, and so I'm going to call it W for website, because maybe let's say I'm a marketing agency, I offer different services, so I'm going to say W and then minor workshop. That's the name of the client. So this is where you may want to think about, do you want to introduce some kind of naming convention to your projects? So in this case, the W, or actually maybe I'll say web. This would be like a website project and then the client's name. I may do something like social, or I might do something like we could do SEO, maybe I offer different services. So whatever your business and the different types of projects you're going to be managing, you may choose to adopt some kind of naming convention. So let's just leave this as web. You can add a description to the project as well. So this may be where I might put some information about the client. So in this case, we might say New Zealand business, 3 employees, I don't know, designing new website. And then down here, I can choose my default view. So there's 4 options, a list, board, timeline, and calendar. I'll show you each of these in a few minutes. For now, I'm just going to leave it on the default, the list option. And then finally, I can choose my privacy options. So I can choose whether I want to make this public to everyone in my team, which means even if I don't add anyone to the project, they still will be able to see it. Or I can make it private to project members, meaning only I can see it, and I have to invite people for other people to see it. So let's create that project now. So here we go, we get to start with a nice blank screen. Now, I guess one of the first things I might want to do is add other members to my project, or I might do this at the end, but I will just explain it now. So up here in the sharing options, I can choose who I want to add to this project. So we can invite John Smith, for example. I can then send him a message to explain what the project is about and just let him know that I've added him. You can also change the permission settings of the project. So I'm going to give John the ability to edit, which means he can change things like the dates and delete tasks. Or you can set a project to comment only, which means he can comment, but he can't edit anything in the project, which can be really useful. And so I could send that request to John. Now, some other things to point out on this page are some of the project notification settings. So if I click here, I can see the different project members, and I can see, yeah, Paul and John. And there are 3 types of notifications that people can receive about this project. So one of them is status updates, which I will show you in a little bit. This is where we can report on how the project is going. The other is conversations, which is sort of like discussions related to the project. And then there's one called tasks added. So if I add any tasks to this project, we'll all be notified. I would say that actually this last one, tasks added, can get a little bit overwhelming, because if John's adding lots to this project, if they're not assigned to me, I probably don't want to see them. So I might choose to unselect that option for myself and maybe for other members as well. So yeah, you can add your project members. These are the people who are involved in the project. You want to do that to make sure that they receive those important updates about the status and the conversations. So let's start to plan this project. The first thing I'll probably think about is, how do I want to use my sections? So I'll come up here and I'll add a section. And I think for this client, what I might do is create phases of work. So let's say phase 1, onboarding. And I can actually use the shortcut tab N to do a new section. And we could do phase 2, development. And then let's just do phase 3, launch. So I've got my sections there. There are some options. If you ever need to, you can rename sections, you can delete them. You can move sections, all of their tasks around as well. Now what I'll do, if I click on this line, I'm going to hit return on my keyboard. I can then start an actual task in my section. So for onboarding, let's say we need to complete client survey. We also need to, let's put a space in there. We need to get brand assets. For development, we need to create website pages, set up hosting, for example. And then for launch, let's go down here. Launch, we need to, website live, notify clients or something like that. So I'm just going to start to think about, what are the things that I need to do for this project? And a comment or a question that I sometimes get is, how granular should you be? Now, this is where it's probably going to depend a little bit on your current use of Asana and how far through the project you are as well. What I tend to find is, if you're fairly new to Asana and the project is still fairly early on in the project as well, you may sort of start more high level and less specific. But then as your own confidence with Asana grows, as your team's use of Asana improves, and as the project itself develops, maybe as you gather more information, you probably will get more specific. So I tend to, when I create a project, I try and think about just what is everything I need to do and try and get as much as I can down, like the big picture stuff. Even if it's not perfect, even if this doesn't cover everything, that's fine. I just want to try and have a place, tasks for all of the key things that I need to do. But you can then break things down and add to this project over time as well. So for example, the brand assets, maybe if I click on this task, this might be where I want to, up here, create some subtasks. And I might say, right, we need, company logo, and we need their, product images, and like their color scheme. So the subtasks can be used to add an extra layer of detail when you want to go a little bit more granular. I'm personally of the opinion that more detail, more granularity is a good thing. As we've talked about in earlier lessons, part of the value of Asana is the visibility and transparency that it creates. Now, that visibility, that transparency on where are we at, what do we need to do, can only come from more detail, or it only gets better the more detail you add to a project. So it's a bit of a balance, because obviously you don't want the project to be overwhelming, but I think you need to find that balance where you've got enough detail so that you can identify what do we need to do and the different pieces of the project. So definitely using the subtasks is a great way to do that. And subtasks, you can think of using them in a couple of ways. Either you could assign subtasks to different people to involve more people in the process. So let's say that I'm responsible for getting these brand assets, so I'll assign this to myself up here. But let's say I'm going to get the logo, yep, I'll do that, but John's going to get the product images, I can assign that to John. And so the subtasks can be used to involve multiple people in a task. So I'm still in charge of the main thing, but John's sort of helping me with this smaller task. The other way that you can sort of think about those subtasks is more as like a checklist. So in this case, maybe I'm going to do the brand assets. Now, I could assign all of these subtasks to myself, but I'm going to choose not to do that for now, because if I assign all of those, they're all going to go onto my task list. My list will get pretty long and a bit more messy with all of these subtasks, when really I don't need to see them, because when I click on this main task, I will see that checklist and I can just tick these off. I don't need to worry too much about assigning them because I'll see them. So yeah, there's a few different ways that you can think about using those subtasks and achieving that balance between providing enough detail in the project and obviously not making it too messy at the same time. So I'm going to continue like this. I've built out my sections. I've got a few tasks in here. Some other things that I can do is I can create some milestones in this project. So milestones, as we've talked about previously, can be used for the important due dates or significant tasks within a project. So in this case, the website going live, that's a big deal. So if I click on the task menu, you can see I have a few different options here. I can add it to another project, I can mark it for approval, I can make it dependent. There's a number of things I can do in here. The one that I'm looking for is mark as milestone. So milestones are really used to pull out those big significant tasks. You can see that visually it looks slightly different in the project. It's this diamond shape, but really it behaves very similar to a normal task. I can assign it to a person. It can have a due date. Maybe we need to get this website live by the end of the month. The only difference is they can't have a date range. So where a task like this, doing the website pages, this is probably something that's going to take quite a while. I will probably apply a date range to this. So I can click my start date and I can apply a range. I can now show it's taking two weeks. And again, I would probably, in this case, I would have some subtasks for like a checklist. We need to do the home page, the about page, contact page, and that kind of thing. So where I can have a date range on normal tasks, milestones, on the other hand, can only have singular due dates. Once I've set up my project and I'm kind of in the trenches, I'm doing the work, there are a few ways that I can filter and edit this project to find the tasks that I'm really interested in. So firstly, I can up here choose whether to look at only my incompleted tasks or to look at everything. Often people get confused about what happens to tasks when you complete them. So for example, this one here, if I mark that as complete, you see it disappears. Now, it's still in the project, it's just been, because we're only looking at incomplete, it's been hidden. So if I turn this to all tasks, we actually can now see that there. So this is a useful way that you can find tasks that were completed today or within the last week. There are some filter options here as well where you can filter the tasks. So this is quite good if you do have quite a lot of detail in your project, if you're getting a bit more comfortable, you're breaking things out quite a lot. Maybe you only want to see the tasks assigned to you. And this is actually something useful to share with your team later on as well, is you can filter and show just tasks assigned to me. Or I may choose to filter by due date and show tasks that are due this week, or maybe let's do a bigger time frame, the next 14 days. Well, I don't have anything yet. But yeah, you get the idea. I can change the filters and the views up here. I can also change the sorting of my project. So by default, there is no sorting applied. That's basically where we just get to use the sections that we've created. But if I want to, and I may only do this temporarily while I'm sort of planning, but I could sort everything by due date. And so it's going to put everything into date order, and then everything that doesn't have a date sits down here. So maybe this one, I need to get this done pretty early on. I can apply a date and it gets moved up. Same with this one, I'll do that next week. And so everything just automatically sorts into date order. So yeah, a few different sorting options. Sorting by assignee can be useful to see who's responsible for different parts of the project as well. But I tend to find that sorting by none to be the most common. The other way to sort, if you don't want to click here, you can click your column headings as well. So if I click here, it will sort by assignee as well. Rules and fields, we won't worry too much about those now. I'm going to cover those in a later lesson. When you're just getting started with your first project, I wouldn't worry too much about rules and fields. They are definitely those more advanced features that we can come back to later on. So once I've set up my project, there are some other tabs up here that we can use that I'm going to explain what they're all about. So like I said at the start, there are 4 different views for this project. You've got your list view, which is really like a nice spreadsheet, and I find it's the one where you can see the most amount of information. It's probably the view that's the most common among Asana users. There is also the board layout, where your columns basically get swapped for, your rows get swapped for these columns. So this can be useful if you're a more visual person, if you've come from tools like Trello. Some people just prefer this slightly more visual layout. The other ways you might use boards is, if I actually switch over to my personal account, I'll go to this timeline, and I'm actually going to switch it to the board layout, is for a project like this, where you can see I have sort of stages of a process, like a Kanban process. So I have like a planning stage, in progress, waiting, and then complete. So generally the tasks move from left to right, through progress, waiting, and then into complete as well. So if you want to sort of track the stage or status of a task, using a Kanban style flow from left to right can be really useful. You'll also see in this project, if I scroll down, they will show thumbnails of images. So if you have a project that's very visual, maybe you're managing design requests and artwork, the board can be really useful to quickly see snapshots of images and things as well. Then we have the timeline. The timeline is an extremely powerful view, one of my favorites in fact, where you can see, especially for those actual projects that have due dates, like the launch of a website or working with a client, it's very useful to see when different tasks are starting and finishing, what's dependent on them as well. So you can see here, as I've applied dates to these tasks in my list, they are showing up in the timeline based on those dates. So the client survey is due on tomorrow, so we see that there on the 6th. Now this website pages, because we applied a date range from the 10th to the 21st, you can see it occupies that 2-week period. And I can click and drag, and I can make these tasks bigger and smaller, and you see now the dates have automatically adjusted. So I actually find that when you are creating your project, working in the timeline can be really useful because it's a very quick way to set the dates. What I personally will do is I will often just list everything first in the list view, and then I'll switch over to timeline. And if you actually click this unscheduled option, I can see all of my tasks that don't have dates, and so I can just drag them on here. So I might drag that here. We'll do hosting there, and notify clients, we'll do that later on over here. That's going to take a couple of days. So that's actually a really quick way to set your dates. If you don't want to be clicking in and picking dates all the time, actually doing it in the timeline can be a lot more efficient. Some other things that we can do in the timeline. Firstly, again, we do have some view options up here. You can toggle to show incompleted tasks, and there is the option to zoom out as well. So if you want to see a larger time frame, you can zoom out there if you need to. There are some color options here as well. I'll explain this more when we get into custom fields in a future lesson. Basically, when you are using colored custom fields or tasks have colors from other projects, you can choose the primary color that gets applied to the timeline. But we'll come back to that in a future lesson. Now, finally, what you can do with timelines, and this is very powerful, is create dependencies. This is where you can illustrate a task can only happen if a previous task is complete. So let's actually move this back. So we're going to get the brand assets there. We're going to do our client survey, and we need to do these two things here, really. We need to complete onboarding before we can create the website pages. So what I'll do is I'll hover my mouse on the task, and you get these little dots appearing. So if I click and drag, and I hold this now, I can drag this onto another task until it turns blue, and then I'm just going to let go. And I'll do the same with this one as well. So you can see I've now created two dependencies here. What this means, if I click on here, I can see these two tasks are dependent. So this achieves a couple of things. Firstly, visually on the timeline, when I'm planning out my project, it's a very useful thought exercise to actually go through that process and think about what tasks need to happen first before other ones can begin. Even if that's all you do is just set up the dependencies, just going through that exercise is really valuable. The other thing it does is it really makes it more transparent to other people as well. So if John is responsible for this task, he can now look at this and he knows, well, Paul, let's say I'm doing both of these. When he looks at his task, he can see, oh, right, well, Paul's doing these other two tasks, so I will follow up with him if, I need to start mine and I'm still chasing him. He knows who he needs to chase, basically. So it creates a bit more transparency around when, who you're working with to get the work done. The other nice thing about this is when I complete my tasks, John will actually be notified as well. So it'll say, Paul has completed his tasks, now you can start your website pages. And then finally, if I delay my tasks, let's say the brand assets, it's going to take longer, let's push this back to there. You can see this automatically shifted because now we can't start this task until this is done, so Asana has shifted it back for me automatically. So it's a really nice way if dates get changed that the project, the other tasks dependent on that can get pushed back as well. It's a really, really powerful way to adjust the dates in your project. Now, based on your project, you may find that you actually don't want that to happen. A good example would be, let's say that we need to do the website pages before the website can go live. So if I push that back, as we said, the website live milestone has now adjusted, but maybe this is a really important deadline. I do not want that to move. In that case, what I can do is in my options over here, I can disable this option to prevent dependency conflicts. That means that if I push this back, the milestone stays where it is, the dependency just turns red. So I know that obviously we need to try and fix something here, but it leaves the milestone where it is. So that's a feature that you can enable or disable based on how you want those dependencies and task dates to behave within your specific project. So, like I said, timeline, very useful view, especially for those projects where you have a due date and you need to work out the sequence of events and when things need to happen. There is also a calendar view as well, which puts everything into a monthly layout. I tend to find people don't use it all that often. It's not a very common view. Certain projects it can be useful. For example, in my content project, if I go to the calendar, I personally find this quite useful if I do want to see when I'm publishing different videos and blog posts and things. I can just move things around if I want to update my posting schedule as well. So for certain projects, it can be useful. I tend to find, though, if you've built out a really detailed timeline, the calendar can get pretty overwhelming and pretty messy, so you probably won't use it. But it is there, something you can use if you choose. So like I said, the first 4 tabs here, these are just 4 different ways of viewing your projects. And as you see, everything's connected, everything's in sync. So if I edit a task here, it's updated back in all of the other layouts as well. Now, the other tabs that we have along here, we have a progress screen. This is where the project owner can get a high-level view of what's going on and report to the team as well. So you can see on the right-hand side, I'm the owner because I created this project originally, but I could change that to somebody else. I've got my description up here that I input, and I can put a due date onto this project as well. So let's say it's due end of the month. Down here we can see our milestones, so as milestones are created on your timeline or in your list, you will see them populate here. So because the milestones tend to illustrate the big pieces of a project, it's nice to be able to see which ones have been completed and which ones are still outstanding. And then we have this status update option here, where I can report on how the project is going to the rest of the team. So I can set my status and I can say the project is on track, which would be, everything's going well, we should hit our deadline. At risk, which would generally imply, maybe we're behind in a few areas, we should be okay, but, just something to be careful on. And then we have off track, which would imply we're behind, we need to pick up our game, we really need to give this project some attention now. So I can set my status and I can say, project is going well. In fact, let's do a bad one. Let's do project slowing down. And you would generally just write a few sentences about how the project is going. So I might say, this task is taking a while. And this is where I can actually, if I type the @ symbol, I can link to tasks in my project or even people as well. So I could say the write content pages. So if I post that now, you can see actually John Smith will be notified because I added him to my project earlier. So I'm going to post that. John's going to get notified and he can see, okay, this task is slowing us down, and we can click and that will actually link me back to that task, which is really useful. As the project owner, I can actually set a reminder for Asana. Asana will remind me to update this status every single Friday. So generally like a weekly or bi-weekly frequency is what people will do for updating these statuses. But this is a really useful feature. It's often underused, I find, but it's a really useful way. Again, it's a useful exercise to think about on a weekly basis and a useful way to update your team on how the project is going. And then finally, down the bottom here, you do see a little progress graph illustrating the tasks that you still have outstanding and the number completed. So if I complete one of my tasks, we should see that graph has just updated there. Obviously the goal is we want to try and get those two lines to meet. The number of tasks completed and the tasks outstanding need to meet up before we hit the due date, ideally. So that's our progress screen. You can also create forms. I won't really spend any time on this now. Forms are a way of getting new tasks into a project in a very structured way. So I probably wouldn't do it for this type of project, but let's say I have a project for feature requests. Maybe I have a development project where I want to get people to submit feature requests. I could have a form and I could share that with other people on my team or maybe customers, and if anyone has a feature request, they can fill out that form and it will input a task into a project which I can then review. So it's a way of getting structured information into tasks into Asana. We'll look at that in a future lesson. And then finally, in the More tab, there's an area to have conversations. So you can see your status updates will show here, as well as other conversations you have about the project if we want to discuss how it's going. I've seen some people will, for a client project like this, when you meet with the client, you might use it for meeting meeting with clients, and you might write your meeting notes in here, and that way you've got all your notes and important ideas all within the project, which is really nice. There is also a Files tab. To be honest, I don't find this particularly useful. If I show you in this project, it really just shows you a snapshot of images and PDFs and things that you've attached to a project, but there's no option to sort the files by type or date, so I find it can be a bit disorganized and just not particularly useful. As I said in an earlier lesson, Asana's not really designed for file storage, so you probably want to keep your files in Dropbox or Google Drive or on your own server. Definitely attach them to your tasks, but for that reason, I tend to find this Files tab doesn't get used all that much. Now, whichever view you like using most in Asana, the board, the timeline, you can actually save your preferred layout. So, for example, if I really like the timeline view, up here, I can save that layout as my default. That means if I ever navigate away from this project and then come back to it, it automatically defaults to the timeline. I don't have to select that view every single time. So that's saving the layout as your default. For projects that you use on a frequent basis, you can also click this star up here. That will put the project into your favorites list. So the favorites is typically used to store those projects that you use on a frequent basis so that you can just get quick access to them. This will be really useful when you add more and more projects to your account. Those projects that you personally work on the most, you can add those to your favorites. It also makes it really handy on the phone as well to easily access them on the Asana app. Now, what I would suggest you do from here is have a go at setting up your own project. It's up to you what type of project you choose to set up. You might want to start with something easy, maybe one of those evergreen projects where you, like an admin or an accounting project, and you just want to brain dump what are the admin or basic tasks that you need to do. or you may choose to do something like a client project. It's up to you. For now, just get familiar with the different features within the project, so setting up sections and tasks and subtasks, assigning them, maybe putting a few dates and things on as well. In future lessons, we'll come back, we'll look at some more advanced features like the rules and the fields as well. But for now, just get comfortable and start having a play. Good luck, and I will see you in the next lesson.